For decades, they've been the absolute peak of science fiction, right? These directed beams of pure energy just zapping targets out of the sky. But here's the thing, combat lasers have left the movie screen and they are on the modern battlefield right now. So the question is, are they the game-changing superweapons we were all promised, or is there some kind of grand deception at the heart of this whole technology? Let's dig in.
So, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the ancient dream of a weaponized beam, then jump into the crazy high-stakes laser race of the Cold War, and uncover a really shocking accusation of a massive scientific hoax. After that, we'll bust some common myths, take a look at the lasers being used today, and try to figure out what the future of lightspeed warfare actually looks like.
First things first, it's really important to get this. The idea of using light as a weapon, it is not new. Not at all. In fact, you could say it's an ancient obsession.
I mean, the earliest story we have goes all the way back to ancient Syracuse. The brilliant inventor Archimedes supposedly got a bunch of soldiers to use their polished shields as mirrors, focusing sunlight onto Roman warships and, well, setting them on fire. Now, historians still debate whether this actually happened, but it doesn't really matter. The idea of a death ray was born, and it totally captured the human imagination for centuries. That ancient dream stayed just a dream until 1960. That's the year physicist Theodore Myman created the very first functional laser. Now, it was a timing ruby laser, not very powerful, but it instantly transformed the concept from fantasy into a real, tangible thing you could build. And you can bet the military sat up and took notice. Immediately.
And that, of course, brings us right to the Cold War, where this brand new technology became the centerpiece of a super high-stakes race between the world's two superpowers. Both the United States and the Soviet Union started pouring absolutely enormous resources into developing laser weapons, and their efforts basically ran in parallel, this constant tit-for-tat. The USSR kicked off its Terra anti-missile program in the 60s. By the 70s, the US was developing these huge chemical lasers, while the Soviets were out in the desert conducting massive tests. Then, in the 80s, the whole race just hit a fever pitch with Reagan's Star Wars initiative and the Soviets trying to launch their own laser battle station into orbit.
Now, here's what's so fascinating, the difference in philosophy between the two sides. The American Star Wars program, SDI, it was this grand, almost utopian vision of a perfect shield in space that would make nuclear war totally impossible. The Soviet programs, on the other hand, things like Terra and Omega, they were much more grounded, aiming for specific defensive goals like protecting Moscow from American missiles or taking out US satellites. For decades, this was the accepted story, a legitimate, if maybe a little too ambitious, technological race. But then, years later, an insider from the Soviet program came forward with a bombshell accusation that the entire Soviet effort was a colossal fraud. Okay, to understand this, we need to know a crucial Russian slang word the insider used, tufta. Tufta isn't just shoddy work. It's a grand swindle, a complete sham, an elaborate fake that's designed to look impressive and deceive the people in charge. Think of it as the illusion of progress, where there's actually nothing there. And you can just feel the bitterness and betrayal in this quote from him. He's asking how so much of the country's brain power, its resources, and its money could just be turned into tufted dust, basically a completely worthless illusion. And he put the blame squarely on who he called the generals of science. He wasn't talking about military generals. He meant the academics and the program leaders who, he claimed, hyped up the potential of lasers just to advance their own careers and get their hands on massive budgets, all while knowing the goals were basically impossible.
So his core argument wasn't just about mismanagement, it was a scientific one. The insider argued that they were ignoring a fundamental law of optics. See, as you try to make a laser beam more powerful and wider so it can work over long distances, any tiny imperfections don't just add up, they multiply exponentially. He claimed this basic fact of physics made the whole idea of a focused, planet-zapping superweapon an unscientific tufta from the very start.
So now we have these two completely conflicting stories, a genuine superpower arms race versus a massive scientific scam. Well, the truth, as it often is, seems to be hiding somewhere in between. So let's start separating fact from fiction by tackling some of the biggest myths that surround this technology. First up is the myth that the technology has just kind of stalled out. In reality, the progress has been absolutely staggering. And it's not just about raw power, it's about how tightly you can focus that beam.
A modern laser system can be literally thousands of times more effective than its Cold War ancestors. That's a massive technological leap. And this is a classic movie trope, right? The hero just whips out a mirror or a polished shield to deflect the laser beam, while in the real world, no mirror is perfectly reflective. Even if it reflects 99.9% of the energy, that last little bit from a high-powered laser is more than enough to instantly heat, melt, and destroy the mirror's surface, making it totally useless. Another common myth is that lasers are just these wild, inefficient energy hogs. And while the early ones definitely were, modern fiber lasers have an efficiency of around 30%. You know what else is in that range? A conventional firearm. Guns typically only convert about 20 to 40% of their energy into actually moving the bullet, so lasers are right in the same ballpark. But that doesn't mean it's all easy. Lasers face some very real, very difficult challenges. And one of the biggest is something called thermal blooming. Basically, the laser beam itself heats the air it's traveling through. This pocket of hot, less dense air acts like a bad lens, causing the beam to spread out and lose focus. Think of the shimmering air over a hot road. It's like that, but it can seriously reduce the laser's power when it finally hits the target. Okay, so despite those challenges, the technology has really matured. So let's take a look at the actual systems that have moved from the test range and into the real world. Today, you've got several nations with operational laser weapons. Israel's Iron Beam is designed to shoot down rockets and drones. The U.S. Navy has the Helios system on its warships for pretty much the same reason. Russia's Peresvet is thought to be an anti-satellite weapon, and China is deploying its own naval systems. Notice the theme here? The focus has shifted from those Star Wars super weapons to much more practical, tactical jobs. So what is the single biggest advantage that's driving this modern laser revolution? It's this: the cost per shot. Think about it. An interceptor missile can cost hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. The cost to fire a high-energy laser, we're talking a few dollars. It's basically just the price of the electricity. That economic advantage is just huge. And then you add in speed of light engagement, which is impossible to dodge. You've got pinpoint, surgical accuracy, and a virtually unlimited magazine as long as you've got power. You can even scale the effect from just temporarily dazzling an enemy's sensor to physically blowing a hole in a target. So, where does all this leave us? I mean, the journey has taken us from an ancient dream to a Cold War fantasy, through these wild accusations of fraud, and finally to a modern battlefield reality. I think the final verdict is this: those grand, sweeping visions of the Cold War, they really were a mix of genuine scientific ambition, a ton of hype, and yeah, a fair amount of what that insider called tufta. The science just wasn't ready. But the underlying technology itself was never a hoax. It just needed a few decades to mature into the real, highly specialized and effective tool that it's becoming today. And that brings us to the final, crucial question. With their super low cost and speed of light abilities, are laser weapons the ultimate defensive tool, the perfect answer to cheap threats like drones and rockets? Or are they just the next destabilizing step in a never-ending arms race, one that just pushes our adversaries to develop new countermeasures and new ways to attack? The era of light warfare has truly begun, and honestly, its consequences are still unfolding.